Section 1-1, the blood red sky. The road surface scorched and curled into a yellowish-brown color. Who is chasing me? Turning around, I only saw an endless asphalt road. The buildings on both sides were like old trash cans, randomly overturned on the roadside. I suddenly threw off the quilt covering my face and sat up, stunned for a while. Again. About 2 months ago, I began to have the same dream repeatedly. I always dreamed of corpses all over the ground and scattered limbs. I dreamed that my blood-stained face was reflected in the glass window of a store. In the dream, my mouth opened and closed, but I couldn't hear my own voice clearly. The electronic clock at the head of the bed beeped once. It was 7 o'clock sharp. I sighed and walked into the bathroom. The girl in the mirror looked pale. I couldn't remember how many times I'd struggled to wake up from a nightmare like this. Since I lost my job, I haven't had a good sleep for several times. Sleep has gradually become something that exhausts me. Maybe I really should see a psychiatrist? I washed my face with clean water and prepared to go out. The garbage at home had been accumulated for a week. I got up early today and could just catch the garbage sorting and disposal time. There weren't many people in the elevator, only a woman sending her child to school. She had a bruise on her forehead and her face was also injured. Seeing me come in, the woman pulled her mask and turned her head away. Suddenly, remembering the sound of fighting and scolding from upstairs last night, I moved my eyes away without a trace, hoping it would make her more comfortable. Coming out of the elevator, the disposal site was just downstairs. The sorting aunt was chatting with several old men and women doing morning exercises. Seeing them shaking their heads frequently, I wondered which owner's gossip they were talking about. I threw all the takeaway packages accumulated in these days into the dry garbage bin. While packing up the express cartons, a low cry suddenly came from the crowd. Oh, really? No way? Really? My daughter was supposed to come back this morning. But as soon as the plane landed, she was taken to the hospital for isolation, saying it was for a safety check. Safety check? What for? Blood routine, CDB ultrasound. Everything that could be done was done. I don't know what the situation is. Safety check? Physical examination? I don't know why, but my heart suddenly beat very fast. For a moment, the scenes in my dream flashed through my mind again. The curled road surface, the disorderly fallen roadblocks, the bright red sunset. Seeing me standing there in a daze, the aunt stepped forward and took the garbage from my hand. Oh dear! You look so neat and clean, but why do you save up the garbage for 4 or 5 days before you are willing to throw it away? Ignoring her teasing, I took out my phone. Weibo was clean as usual, with some celebrity gossips and social hotspots. Strange. Is it a resurgence of the epidemic? I frowned and quickened my pace home. Only a few days had passed since Double 11, and the daily necessities at home had just been replenished. I was sitting in front of the computer, browsing the product pages. A few years ago, an epidemic swept across the world. However, as time elapsed, the virus became increasingly mild. Up to now, a situation of coexistence with humans has been achieved to a certain extent. For ordinary citizens who have been engaged in a long struggle with the virus, an outbreak within a certain area has become a commonplace. I retrieved the order history record and randomly selected some snacks, instant noodles, and ham sausages. Beep, beep, beep. A message from Taobao customer service promptly popped up. Sorry, dear. Currently, all express deliveries arriving in or passing through Chunshen City have been suspended. I was astounded and was about to inquire further when the customer service had already posted the announcements of various express companies. It was clearly stated that starting from November 16th, that is, yesterday, all express delivery services to Chunshen City had been suspended. What was going on? Was the city going to be locked down? I vaguely sensed that something was amiss. Even if the epidemic made a comeback, things usually developed step by step. There was no relevant information, nor any news reports about an unknown virus. How could a city be directly surrounded? At 12:37 p.m. on November 17th, I began to harbor a more profound concern for the future. The government did not seem to be implementing a general epidemic prevention policy, and I had to make preparations as soon as possible. I screened the shops with a shipping address in the same city and began to make a careful selection. Self-heating rice, bagged instant noodles, and compressed biscuits were chosen. The individual combat rations were more abundant than I had envisioned, and the taste seemed rather good. There were 2 servings in each package and 12 packages in each box. I stocked up 10 boxes in total. I noted all the orders as paid by recipient upon delivery with SF Express and retrieved a mask from the drawer, preparing to go out. The nearest supermarket was approximately 1 kilometer away from my home. I planned to go and purchase some fresh fruits and vegetables. The weather in November had turned cold. The fallen leaves of the plane trees on the street had not been completely swept away, and were making a rustling sound as pedestrians walked on them. From a distance, a Nongfu spring water station was seen to be surrounded by a large crowd. The clerks were busy transporting water to the long line of private cars. What's going on? Someone asked the owner standing aside. The water supply in Zone Q has been cut off. Now we have to rely on drinking water for transition. The storage capacity of that water station is not enough. The water supply has been cut off. I haven't heard about it. The boss shrugged, saying, "Not only is the water supply going to be cut off, but I heard that the power supply will also be cut off in a few days." A friend of mine who does solar business has seen his orders multiply several times recently. My heart sank. This was not good news. From the tone of the boss, it seemed that the water supply in Zone Q had been cut off for some time. Water and electricity are the most basic livelihood guarantees. Allowing such a large-scale suspension of water and electricity supply was unimaginable. Was it because of the epidemic? It didn't make sense. It seemed that Chunshen City was really going to have big trouble. I changed my mind then. Instead of going directly to the supermarket, I took a detour to a nearby vegetable market. Today was a weekday, and this vegetable market was deserted. I took out the list I had just organized on my phone, on which there were about 10 kinds of vegetables that could be stored for a long time. There were potatoes, corn, as well as cauliflower, Chinese cabbage, and other cruciferous vegetables. According to the information on the internet, if these vegetables were processed properly, they could be stored for several months. After visiting several stalls, I purchased 2 sacks of potatoes, 1 sack of corn. There were also several baskets of cauliflower, cabbage, and Chinese cabbage. I ordered a medium-sized van for transporting goods on my phone and estimated that it would arrive in a while. Coincidentally, there was a hardware store across the street. I went in and looked around. I bought 3 1-meter-high water storage barrels with lids and faucets, a PVC hose, 3 rolls of tape, 4 ABS solid pipes, 2 transparent rainproof cloths, a hot melt glue gun, and several boxes of glue sticks, and a household toolbox. When I was wandering around in the hardware store, the master's vehicle had arrived. There were many things, and we moved them back and forth for several trips. We got on the vehicle and headed straight for the supermarket. The sky was gradually getting dark, and it was the evening rush hour. Since I didn't live in the central urban area, the traffic condition was not bad. The supermarket had many barrels of water for sale. After thinking for a long time, I finally gritted my teeth and bought 50 barrels. I also bought several boxes of wet and dry tissues and disinfectants, some snacks and drinks, and 3 thermos bottles. In addition, I bought a vacuum sealing machine and several boxes of vacuum packaging bags. I left my phone number and address, and the staff promised to deliver the goods to my door tomorrow. When I was about to go out, I found that the entrance of the shopping mall was crowded with people. The streets that were empty just now were full of parked vehicles. It seemed that a conflict had broken out in the chaos. In a scream, I saw 2 men fighting with each other. The punches were hitting hard without any mercy. I squeezed out of the crowd and jumped onto a truck. "Let's go," I urged while fastening my seatbelt. My phone was vibrating continuously in my pocket. When I opened it, the messages in all WeChat groups were refreshing crazily. I clicked on one of the links. The screen jumped to Weibo. Chunshen City was prominently listed as the top search on Weibo. I guessed correctly. The epidemic seemed to have broken out locally once again. I scrolled down to read the comments. People were revealing the locations of the epidemic one after another, including schools, hotels, residential areas, and even prisons. In short, opinions varied, and no consensus was reached. At 19:17 in the evening of November 17th, the city was locked down. It had truly arrived. After arriving at the community, I paid an extra amount and asked the delivery man to carry the items upstairs. After a tiring day, I finally sat down at the table for dinner, but I didn't feel relieved. The government's measures were even tougher than I had expected. While eating, I browsed around on Douban, and several posts quickly caught my attention. One post, which was about the discussion of the water cutoff in Zone Q, and was posted yesterday afternoon, finally became a hot topic on the internet after 2 or 3 rounds of large-scale water cutoffs. Someone posted a photo of the blockade of the water supply plant in Zone Q. Although the picture was not very clear, the yellow and black warning lines and the staff in white protective suits on duty could still be recognized. There were also many superstitious posts using the heavenly stems and earthly branches for fortune-telling. For example, rat represents epidemic, ox represents water, tiger represents dispute, rabbit represents famine. Rabbit years have always been years of great famine, and many people will die of food shortage this year. After the announcement of the lockdown in Chunshen City, these superstitious posts became very popular, undoubtedly causing great panic immediately. I read the post several times before closing the page. The direction is wrong. I re-examined today's shopping list. If the water and electricity supply could not be guaranteed, it was estimated that the gas and food would also be in a difficult situation. Winter was approaching. The weather would become colder and the nights would be longer. Afraid of getting confused, I simply found a nutrition table for reference. I bought some rice and dried noodles and also bought several large packs of oatmeal as a supplement to cereal foods. The protein intake mainly relied on canned food and frozen meat with a long shelf life, such as Maxine canned food, Mountain House canned food, and Malling canned food, all of which seemed to be of sufficient quantity. After buying the canned food, I also bought some bacon and ham incidentally. I gave up on fish, shrimp, and seafood. Eggs have a short shelf life of about a month and cannot be stored for a long time. Milk and yogurt could be bought in several boxes. As for other oil, salt, and condiments, I had some at home. I replenished some and also bought some vitamin supplements. Only some commonly used medicines were selected, along with iodophor and disinfectant alcohol. I bought an additional 50 barrels of drinking water. Theoretically, the daily water consumption per person is approximately 2 L. However, after adding necessary washing and cleaning, I had no idea how long these water could be used. The problems of electricity and gas were much more difficult to deal with. I reluctantly chose a 600 OG solar generator. The complete system, including a storage battery, an inverter, and a controller, could be connected to 220 volts household appliances and could also be directly connected to a USB. I also bought 2 cassette stoves. The supporting butane gas cans were not expensive. I bought several boxes as it was said that they were better than alcohol stoves. Some outdoor supplies were also prepared. 2 large capacity hiking backpacks, 3 solar flashlights, some batteries, a bundle of ropes, and 2 pairs of gloves. After thinking about it, I also bought some vegetable seeds, including lettuce, bok choy, soybeans, peas, spinach, small-leafed garland chrysanthemum, peppers, ginger, and garlic. The growth cycles of these were basically within a month. The supporting gardening tools, potting soil, fertilizers, and planting boxes were also ordered together. In order to make the best use of the space, I also bought many racks and boxes for storage. During this period, I wanted to stop this absurd behavior more than once. However, every time at this moment, a voice would suddenly pop up saying, you know what will happen, just do it. Before it's too late. Do I really know? With uneasiness, I quickly cleared the tableware and prepared to replan the usable area of my home to make enough space for the coming supplies. I am not from this city. After losing my job, I moved from District A near the city center to District J, where my current house is located. District J is actually an old urban area and its living facilities are not for worse. But with the northward shift of the economic center of Chunshen City, District J has become almost a suburb. The house I'm currently renting is more than 100 square meters. It has 2 bedrooms and 2 living rooms with a kitchen, a bathroom, and 2 balconies. The master bedroom and the larger balcony face south, while the second bedroom and the small balcony face north. I walked around each room and decided to clear out the furniture in batches. When I was dragging the TV cabinet and appeared in the lobby for the 4th time, the cleaning lady who had been observing for a long time finally couldn't help asking me, "Are you moving at night?" I nodded and said, "Yes, I don't want these anymore. Will it be a problem if I leave them here?" She quickly waved her hand and said, "It doesn't matter. Auntie will help you deal with them. Do you have any other furniture you don't want?" I thought for a while and said, "There are also 2 beds and a set of sofas and some cabinets and tables." The cleaning lady quickly patted her chest and promised to take care of it. Maybe these things were worth some money. The cleaning lady was afraid that I would change my mind, so she soon brought several young men and moved all the furniture away. The previously slightly crowded home suddenly became empty. After cleaning it once, I used alcohol for daily disinfection. From now on, this is my base. I thought as I got into the warm quilt. This time, I no longer had a nightmare. In a trance, it seemed as if someone was sitting on the head of my bed. She was flipping through a book in her hand and telling me a story in a slow and measured way. The wild geese begin to fly south, and the leaves also start to turn yellow bit by bit, yet the sun remains as warm as ever. I couldn't clearly see her face, but intuitively, I felt that she must be as kind as my grandmother. If you begin to feel happy because of the warmth, it indicates that the weather is getting colder bit by bit. She was twisting the pages of the book, with her entire person enveloped in a dim yellow light. The hunters in the forest must have faith in their sense of smell. Otherwise, they will miss many cues from nature. It will be too late when the heavy snow blocks the door. At 7:53 in the morning on November 18th, it was the 14th hour of the lockdown. I was lying on the bed, lost in a daze, when I received a call from the supermarket. The person on the other end inquired about when it would be convenient for me to sign for the delivery that day. Living in an apartment building, the possibility of transporting such a large quantity of supplies in without leaving any traces was extremely low. I had also considered the idea of picking them up in batches. However, given the extremely rapid spread of the epidemic this time, if things didn't go according to plan, all these purchases would be in vain. Sometimes an excessive pursuit of meticulous perfectionism can be counterproductive. 10 o'clock, I said. At this time, there were many people going to work or school, so it was advisable to avoid as many as possible. When I opened the logistics information, I saw that the orders were basically in the process of being delivered. Only the barrels of water I purchased last night had not yet been picked up. Throughout the day, a continuous stream of packages was delivered to my door. I disinfected each one with alcohol before bringing them into the house. I placed all 50 barrels of mineral water sent by the supermarket in the second bedroom. There were 10 barrels in a row and 3 barrels in height, arranged in 2 rows in this manner. Behind the water barrels, I placed 2 rows of 2-meter-long shelves. The living room and the master bedroom were arranged in a similar fashion, with a row of shelves placed against each of the 2 walls. The second bedroom faced north and had a relatively low temperature. This room was specifically designated for storing food with a shorter shelf life. As for canned food, instant noodles, and compressed biscuits, I placed them in the master bedroom and the living room. By the time I finally sorted and stored all of the supplies in the storage boxes, it was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The solar panels were smaller than I had anticipated, approximately 1 meter long and half a meter wide, and I received 8 of them. There also existed 4 batteries of 250, which could store approximately 12 kilowatt hours of electricity. I attempted to place them and found that only 5 panels could be placed side by side on the retractable closed drying rod on the balcony. If the weather was favorable, approximately 7 kilowatt hours of electricity could be generated in a day. I fiddled with the wires and connected them. As for the remaining 3 panels, I would later study how to install them. The next day, the community implemented strict lockdown measures. It could be said that I had almost stocked up on essential supplies for survival just before the lockdown countdown ended. I felt more regretful than fortunate about this. From the relatively mild policies a few days ago to the full lockdown today, it had been less than 72 hours. All the drinking water in the city was urgently requisitioned and became strategic epidemic prevention supplies. My online shopping orders were also canceled. The water cut-off problem had not been alleviated, and it was only a matter of time before District J was affected. I took out the water storage barrels and cleaned them. Each barrel was approximately 1.5 meters high. After filling them with water using a hose, I placed 2 of them on the south balcony and the other one on the north balcony. I also checked the controller. Up to this point, the solar panels had generated less than 2 kilowatt hours of electricity. There was no sun on this day, and it seemed to have a significant impact on the power generation. In autumn and winter in Chunshen City, it was predominantly cloudy, with few sunny days and even less precipitation. Water and electricity were likely to become the most significant problems for me at this stage. I called my parents last night. I repeatedly urged them to stock up more food at home, not to go out recently, and not to visit relatives. Although Yandu City was far away from here, it was prudent to be cautious. I summoned my spirits and decided to process the agricultural products on the balcony and in the kitchen as soon as possible. The 2 sacks of potatoes were estimated to weigh about 100 jin. I washed the potatoes, peeled them, soaked them in light salt water, and finally vacuumed. Packed them, the TV in the living room was on. Almost all the channels were reporting on the epidemic in Chunshen City. The strict policies were not as effective as expected, and there were multiple outbreaks in the city. This time, someone captured some scattered images in the epidemic-stricken community. The images quickly spread on the internet. In the pictures, 2 staff members in protective suits were standing at the checkpoint at the entrance of the community. However, not long after, one of them, who was slightly taller, suddenly threw himself at his colleague. The video ended abruptly at this point. However, soon the 2 parties involved appeared on camera to apologize, stating that it was due to excessive work pressure that led to the contradiction and argument. This reminded me of the news from some time ago. Recently, there have been frequent incidents of violent crimes in Chunshen City, which have seriously affected social order. Everyone seemed to have become very irritable. Continuing to browse the comment section, a comment left by a medical staff caught my attention. "Our hospital has not admitted any patients with unexplained pneumonia," she said, "but instead, the surgical patients are extremely crowded." Even more peculiarly, her hospital had issued a notice of suspension of work. According to the latest regulations, only 1 hospital was to be retained in a certain administrative area. This was unimaginable for Chunshen City, which was already in a difficult situation. Unless, someone replied in this way, unless the existing medical means are completely ineffective. My mood grew even heavier. I put down my phone and continued with my work at hand. Time passed swiftly during this repetitive labor. In the evening, it began to rain lightly outside. Through the window, scarcely any people could be seen walking in the community. Only a few fully armed workers in white were distributing supplies. Finally, at dawn, all the fruits and vegetables were processed and stored in piles on the shelves in the second bedroom. And because I had maintained the same posture for a long time, my neck was almost frozen. Having done excessive physical work in the past few days, I began to feel soreness in my back and waist today. The sun had warmed the quilt, making it difficult for me to resist the urge to be lazy. It was not until the sun was high in the sky that I finally got out of bed. I turned on the faucet, but there was no water flowing. On November 19th, the third day of the lockdown, the water supply was cut off. To be precise, the water stopped in the early morning of that day. At 5 o'clock in the morning, someone reported this situation in the owner's group. The property management stated that they were in contact with the water supply company, and it might be due to an accidental damage to the pipeline, which required urgent repair, hoping for everyone's understanding. The water cutoff in District J was completely within my expectation, although I was not certain whether it was related to the current epidemic situation. I moved my toiletries to the balcony, where the solar panels were generating electricity stably. Leaning on the railing, I looked down. The world was changing at such a rapid pace that it was difficult for anyone to remain unaffected. It would transform one's behavior, lifestyle, and even thinking habits in a profound manner. I often felt a sense of strangeness. At this moment, I seemed like a stranger observing coldly from the sidelines. Occasionally, I also felt lonely. Although I had been living alone in the city since graduating from university, for some reason I began to miss my family and friends from my school days more frequently. I called my parents every night without fail. I heard that everything was normal in Yandu City, and the situation there should be better than here. I also ceased trying to persuade them to stock up on goods, and instead directly placed an order for the items on my shopping list, which was estimated to arrive soon. Middle-aged people of this age group are typically extremely stubborn, especially those who have an extreme belief in science. If my parents knew that I had made such a big fuss merely because of a dream, they would surely scold me. Returning to the kitchen, I continued to complete the work left from yesterday. Compared to potatoes, the remaining vegetables were much easier to handle. For corn, one only needed to peel off the outer skin and it could then be directly vacuum packed. The treatment methods for cabbage and Chinese cabbage were very similar. Cauliflower required little treatment, which saved me a significant amount of time. After all the vegetables had been processed, the balcony and the kitchen were finally less crowded. Next, I spent a long time researching how to maximize the efficiency of the solar panels. After searching on Taobao, I found that all solar panel brackets had a certain inclination angle. However, I had too few tools and materials at hand. It was infeasible to install 8 solar panels at an angle on the balcony using only glue. Although the plan for maximum power generation failed, it did not prevent me from carrying out some other repairs. I used a hot melt glue gun to reinforce the contact area between the solar panels and the drying rod once again, and protected the exposed wires with waterproof tape. Just then, the doorbell rang. Looking at the time, it should be the volunteer in charge of delivery. Thank you. Just leave it at the door, I said as I walked towards it. However, the bell did not stop ringing. Looking out through the peephole, I saw the light flickering. Wondering what was happening, a distorted face suddenly appeared in front of my eyes due to magnification. The eyeball facing me was completely covered with a haze. The pupil was so small that it was almost invisible and was swirling in the eye socket like a fly. He was looking inside. I took a step back subconsciously. I recognized him. It was old Yang, the security guard downstairs. How could he have become like this? Was he still old Yang? However, I did not know yesterday that this was our first encounter. On November 20th, 2022, it was the 4th day of the lockdown, and it came again. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Upon confirming that there were occupants inside the house, it grew even more patient and persistent. I withdrew to the living room and surveyed the surroundings. There were no convenient weapons available at home. Recalling that there seemed to be a hammer in the toolbox I had purchased a few days ago, I retrieved it and grasped it in my hand. I had no inkling of what had befallen old Yang. Nor did I understand how a person in such a condition could still partake in the distribution of supplies. You must be more cautious and more perceptive. That voice resurfaced from the depths of my heart once again. You know? They have already emerged. What on earth is going on? Why would I have such a thought? I shook my head to compose myself. Since the outbreak of the epidemic, these voices had been incessantly urging me to press forward. Simultaneously, a series of eerie incidents have been taking place. Up to this point, not only had the water supply remained unrecovered, but even the mobile phone signal had begun to be intermittent. And the nightmare that had haunted me for nearly 2 months had vanished without a trace, as if it had fulfilled its mission. Taking a deep breath, I quelled the uneasiness welling up within me. Amid the repeated chiming of the doorbell, I proceeded with my unfinished work with the utmost caution. In the afternoon, I perused a substantial amount of materials. 2 hours prior to sunset, I finally reached the final stage of constructing the base, cultivating seeds. I retrieved the seeds from the storeroom and took stock of them. There were 500-gram bags of spinach, bok choy, lettuce, garland chrysanthemum, and chili seeds, along with 1,000-gram bags of soybean and pea seeds. I took out some seeds from each of the 5 bags of vegetable seeds and immersed them in warm water. It was said that seeds treated in such a manner boasted a higher germination rate. After soaking the seeds, I began to assess my 2 balconies. After positioning 2 buckets on the south balcony, a sizable expanse of vacant space remained. I partitioned it into 2 sections using a passageway. The incubator could be assembled to the desired dimensions freely. I erected the water storage layer and the water-permeable net in sequence, then poured the compressed potting soil into the box, loosened it, and subsequently added fertilizer and mixed them thoroughly. It took approximately 6 bags of potting soil to give the garden its initial form. The north balcony was inherently not of a large area. Besides a bucket, there was also a vertical washing machine. Consequently, I only carved out a long and narrow nursery near the outer edge of the balcony. All the seeds were sown here initially. Once they had passed the seedling stage and developed true leaves, they would be transplanted into the vegetable garden on the south balcony. Regarding the rainwater collection device, I procured 2 sets of materials with the intention of installing them on both balconies. However, to be honest, I did not hold much confidence in this regard and could only endeavor to give it a try. The construction of the 2 balconies consumed more time than I'd anticipated, yet it bestowed upon me a great deal of confidence. This abode was beginning to exude a semblance of a survival base. It was not cozy or aesthetically pleasing, but it was vibrant. There was a sense of a cruel beauty about it. When I re-entered the house, the doorbell had ceased ringing. Peering through the peephole, I observed that old Yang had long since vanished, leaving only a solitary bag of supplies at the door. I had no intention of opening the door to retrieve it. I was acutely aware that all I could do at present was to maintain silence and remain observant. In the ensuing few days, the network connection was erratic, being functional at times and faltering at others. I devoted more of my time to gathering and organizing information. Only by remaining sufficiently astute can one maximize their chances of survival. In the forest, there is, in fact, no clear demarcation between hunters and prey. Laying down one's gun implies a transformation of identity. Clutching my mobile phone, I drifted off to sleep before I was even aware of it. In a state of haziness, I first caught the sound of a hubbub, and immediately thereafter, the violent pounding on the front door that reverberated through the air. I was instantly jolted awake. The living room was shrouded in complete darkness. I crouched low and inched closer to the door. While attuning my ears to the commotion outside, I fumbled about until I located the hammer on the shoe cabinet. There were approximately 5 or 6 individuals outside the door. The induction lights in the corridor had malfunctioned. They were brandishing their flashlights and taking turns to rap on the doors of 3 households. The middle-aged man who seemed to be the leader stood in the middle, his arms folded across his chest, remaining silent. The man in the jacket beside him was quite resolute in his assertion. I remember it vividly. "You saw it too, right?" The woman standing behind him nodded her head in quick succession. However, despite all the clamor they were making, not a single household opened their door to respond. Apart from their hushed whispers, the corridor was devoid of any other sound. Whom were they seeking? I retrieved my mobile phone from my pocket and tapped into the owner's group. I scrolled upward to search for the previous messages. With such an abundance of water, you could surely donate a portion for everyone's use. In times of hardship, we ought to offer mutual assistance. Another forceful thump on the door startled me, causing me to nearly lose my grip on the mobile phone, so it was on account of this. I immediately felt a sense of unease grip me. I had indeed stockpiled a considerable amount of drinking water. However, considering there were over 90 households in this building, how much would I be required to distribute? And how long would it last? It is wiser to avoid unnecessary complications. Compared to this, I was more concerned about revealing the situation of my food reserves at home during the process of distribution. I pressed my lips together tightly and refrained from making a sound. As long as the other households did not cooperate, they would be unable to single me out. After a brief discussion, the group of people once again congregated in front of the door of room 901. This time, the sole woman among them stepped forward to knock on the door. She addressed the occupant in a gentle and coaxing tone. Little sister, Auntie knows you. We really don't wish to disturb you at this late hour, but the situation is rather special now. We're all neighbors. Do us a favor, won't you? I recognize this woman as the cleaner who worked downstairs. I'm quite familiar with the owner of room 903, and the people in room 902 just moved out a few days ago. They're the only resident left on the 9th floor. In the days to come, as we'll be living in the same building, there will be numerous instances where we'll need to offer mutual support. She was on the verge of saying something more when the door of room 901 swung open. I felt as if my heart had been suddenly clenched. Since the corridor was clogged with these people, I was unable to catch a clear view of the situation. All I could hear was the voice of a girl. Despite the imposing spectacle before her, her tone remained remarkably calm. I mean, can't you people be a bit more mindful of the time when you come to visit others? And I don't have the faintest idea what you're talking about. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police. At this juncture, the others finally came to their senses. Auntie was just having a friendly chat with you. One can't be so selfish. Didn't we usually deliver the vegetables you ate? Everyone should contribute to the community. Didn't your teacher teach you that? One of the men was on the verge of lashing out physically as he spoke, but the others quickly intervened to restrain him. Okay, I'm going to sleep. The girl dismissed their incessant chatter. Good night, everyone. Before they could react, the door was promptly shut again. The man was seething with rage and still had the urge to smash the door. However, the remaining few individuals seemed to be more level-headed and managed to drag him away, coaxing him as they did so. The corridor once again lapsed into silence. Returning to bed, I stared blankly at the ceiling, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. I tossed and turned restlessly until daybreak. After a night of sleeplessness, I reached a decision. At 6:23 in the morning on November 22nd, the 6th day of the lockdown, I knocked on the door of room 901. However, in the very next moment, I was seized with regret. This was sheer madness. What on earth was I doing? I actually went ahead and knocked on the door of a complete stranger. Just as I was hesitating about whether to leave, the door swung open. What greeted my eyes was a fresh and clear countenance. It seemed that she too had not slept well the previous night. Her complexion was pale and she appeared somewhat haggard, but upon seeing me, she seemed rather pleased. Hello. I stared at her blankly. It's not really convenient to talk here, perhaps. Let's go to your place. Before I could even finish my sentence, she stepped out of the room and led me back to 902. Since the sofa and coffee table had long been cleared away, I guided her to sit at the dining table and poured her a glass of water. I'm truly sorry for causing you trouble last night. After mulling it over for quite some time, I ventured to ask, I'd like to know why? Why did you come to my aid? She had witnessed it. On the day when the water was delivered, the workmen had made several trips back and forth. She happened to be waiting for the elevator in the corridor at that time. I had been residing here for over 3 months, and our chance encounters had been few and far between, scarcely qualifying us as nodding acquaintances. I couldn't fathom why she had acted as she did under the circumstances of last night. She took the teacup from my hand and took a hearty swig. Well, let me think about how best to put it. Actually, it wasn't just the water. I also caught sight of many of your packages. Although there had been numerous rumors regarding the epidemic before, I hadn't paid them much heed. So, in a sense, it was you who alerted me. Yes, that's right. She blinked her eyes. So consider it's my way of repaying the favor. So did she also stock up on supplies? Of course, she made no attempt to conceal it. As you are in the know, I do sincerely hope to become your companion. However, don't misconstrue this as a form of coercion. What happened yesterday was but a trifling matter. I lowered my head to take a sip of water. I had envisioned that she might expose me or impose her demands on me based on this. In either of those scenarios, I would not have caved in. But it had never crossed my mind that she would do nothing but return the decision-making power to me. She was astute. She had opted for the most amicable way to demonstrate her goodwill. Yet, at the same time, she was surprisingly candid. So candid that for a moment, I found myself unable to conjure up a plausible excuse to rebuff her. I don't know why, but there seemed to be an air of familiarity about her that I found irresistible. After a long while, I heard myself heave a sigh. I might let you down. Actually, I don't really know anything. Knowing that I couldn't elucidate it clearly, I simply recast my dream in a different light. A friend informed me that something unpleasant might occur in the near future, not just unpleasant. The situation might well be even worse. She didn't delve deeper into my explanation, but picked up where I left off and continued. Last night, I couldn't even get a call through. Then, when you said you call the police, it was just to give them a bit of a scare. Silence descended upon the dining table. Had the base station also malfunctioned? The entire world seemed to be gradually veering off course, slipping inexorably towards the abyss. I had thought that I was fully prepared to face everything on my own, but at this moment, when someone extended a hand to me, I still subconsciously felt the urge to grasp it. I must admit that people are invariably far more vulnerable than they imagine themselves to be. At present, the communication has been interrupted, and the corridor is by no means a safe place either. The neighbors eyeing us covetously, the oddly behaving old Yang. All of these pose latent risks. After some discussion, she went back to gather some personal belongings and move them, along with various supplies, to my place. I arranged her bed in the living room and gave her a tour of the house. Although she had been somewhat mentally prepared, she couldn't help but exclaim when she saw the piles of vegetables stacked like mountains in the second bedroom. I pointed to the notepad hanging on the side and said, "There is one on the shelf in each different area." Before storing the items, I counted each of them and also recorded the expiration dates to avoid spoilage and consequent waste. You can just take whatever you want to eat later. Remember to update the relevant data. The fuel cans are all stored on this row of shelves. Be cautious not to let any open flame get close to them. I led her through the living room. All the seeds are still being cultivated on the north balcony. For the time being, only some strawberries have been planted on the south balcony. There are still numerous fresh fruits in the refrigerator. It would be advisable to consume them within half a month. I also imparted some other precautions to her. Not bad. You're quite decisive in taking action. She leaned back against the railing, examining the extremely ugly rainwater collector I had made. Being complimented by her, I actually felt a bit sheepish instead, because based on my self-awareness, it was quite the opposite. I'm cautious and conservative, always prone to doubting and vacillating. I am a person full of contradictions. The epidemic has been lingering for such a long time, although I have witnessed all kinds of revelations. I have seen the videos of people attacking each other on the internet. I have seen many extraordinary epidemic prevention measures. I have seen old Yang, the security guard who resembled a zombie. Yet, I still find it arduous to associate this virus with the end of the world. I am even still stubbornly and naively referring to it as an epidemic, as if, by doing so, our lives would revert to normal in the near future. I am incapable of going to extremes either. I cannot go on a wild spree of taking out loans and maxing out my credit cards. I cannot abandon my current residence and resolutely seek a larger and safer dwelling. I even contemplated that in case of a misjudgment, I would simply list everything that could be sold on Xianyu, a Chinese secondhand trading platform. My caution is a double-edged sword. What I am doing now is already the limit of my capabilities. Rationality sometimes can plunge people into a state of blind optimism and arrogance, and the first lesson that the doomsday has taught me is to trust my intuition. I'm not decisive in taking action. I'm merely forcing myself to abandon futile thinking, thereby making myself appear to be action-oriented. She noticed that I seemed a bit dejected and nudged my shoulder with a smile, saying, "Today is the first day of us being teammates. You wouldn't be thinking of dodging the welcome feast, would you?" It was a rather childish way of provoking, but it worked perfectly on me. So at noon, I magnanimously tossed 2 packs of tonkotsu ramen and a potato into the electric cooker. I also gritted my teeth and opened a 400-gram can of braised beef and soy sauce and a large bottle of orange juice. While eating, we realized that we hadn't introduced ourselves to each other yet. You can call me Xiao He. I used to be a biology teacher. However, before I could work properly for a few days, the institution underwent rectification and I have been unemployed for months, I said with a rueful smile. Biology? Isn't this virus precisely within your field of study then? And I picked up a chopstick of noodles. Not at all, I continue with a rueful smile. I merely teach some knowledge from the textbooks. She nodded and said, "I am 2 years older than you. I work in a nearby hospital." Great. I immediately perked up and said, "You're actually a doctor. Then won't I have to worry about getting sick in the future?" "Well, not exactly." She became modest instead. "Are you a surgeon or an internist? Not a Western medicine doctor? Could it be a traditional Chinese medicine doctor?" Xiao He. And Anne didn't dare to look straight into my eager eyes and stammered, "I'm a veterinarian." On the second day following Anne's move into my place, I was reclining against the bay window, engrossed in a book. A thick quilt had been laid out on the windowsill. Before long, I drifted off into a doze. In a state of semi-consciousness, I caught the sound of a woman's piercing scream. The sound was so close that it jolted me awake immediately, dispelling my drowsiness in an instant. I hastened to the living room where Anna was standing on the balcony. She looked rather pale and motioned for me to come over with a wave of her hand. The noise was even more distinct when heard from the outside. It was emanating from upstairs, no more than 2 floors above us. Furniture was being dragged across the floor, accompanied by the clattering of bowls and plates as they were knocked over, intermingled with the woman's terrified pleas for mercy and desperate cries for help. And Anne and I exchanged a glance, neither of us uttering a word. Suddenly, all the sounds ceased abruptly. In the next moment, a hazy black figure streaked past right before our eyes. Before we could even register what was happening, it had already plummeted heavily onto the concrete ground on the first floor. I clasped my hand tightly over my mouth, suppressing any sound that threatened to escape. Annan swiftly leaned out to take a quick look and then promptly pulled me back into the living room, locking the balcony door behind us. "How is it?" I managed to force out a few words through gritted teeth. She shook her head. There's no way she could have survived. What on earth happened? This is sheer murder. I couldn't control my trembling. It's not murder. And Anne's lips had turned a deathly white. It's suicide. There was hardly any intact flesh left on her body. Her thighs and arms were reduced to mere bones. She had been eaten. Before she could finish her sentence, I heard the door of room 903 being flung open with a loud bang. A man let out a string of curses as he dashed towards the fire escape. There seemed to be footsteps in hot pursuit, the two figures one after the other. No, it wasn't just the neighbor next door. There were numerous others as well. I could hear the pandemonium reigning in the fire escape. For a moment, the entire residential complex seemed to have transformed into a scene of carnage. The housing estate, which had been eerily silent for days due to the lockdown, now erupted into a macabre frenzy, as if in its death throes. Many people burst out of the lobby, but where could they possibly flee to? Standing out in the open, exposed and without any shelter, they would only make themselves more conspicuous targets. Cries of anguish, supplications for mercy, roars of desperation. I witnessed the panicked crowd scattering in all directions. I saw the man across the way choking his deranged wife to death with his own hands in the bedroom. I beheld a child standing by the roadside, wailing inconsolably, while his grandmother was gnawing at his hands and feet. And in many places beyond my line of sight, numerous people were faced with harrowing choice: to slay them, or to be slain by them. I felt a violent churning in my stomach. This ghastly scene had completely shattered my psychological defenses. Why? I cowered in the chair. Haven't we all been quarantined? Why did everyone get infected? They're not only infected, but the onset of the symptoms occurred almost simultaneously. Anne furrowed her brows tightly. Could it be that they were all infected at the same time? Apart from residing in the same community, these people scarcely had any interaction on a daily basis. How could they have possibly been infected with the virus simultaneously? Do you mean the source of infection lies not outside but within the community itself? I licked my parched, pale lips. But after the virus outbreak, everyone was mandated to quarantine at home. Even within the same community, there was no conceivable means of transmission. Unless it was through some public conduit. And Anne took a seat beside me. But I also consumed the supplies distributed by the community, and I was using the water normally before the government announced the water cutoff. Why am I unaffected? I don't know. Now it was my turn to offer that response. Nevertheless, this also implies that there should be some other individuals within the community who, like us, have remained uninfected. We have no way of knowing precisely how many there are. The slaughter continued until sunset. The thick stench of blood tinted the setting sun, and the sky a lurid scarlet. Clusters of infected individuals were scattered throughout the community. In stark contrast to their previous frenzied state, they now stood there blankly, like machines that had been abruptly unplugged. In the Genesis of the Bible, it is recorded that God created all manner of things during the first 6 days. And on the 7th day, when God had completed all his work of creation, he rested. On November 23rd, the 7th day of the lockdown, the virus erupted in a full-blown outbreak within the community.